I am so looking forward to this morning's debate. I hope you are too. As a dad of 7 and 5 of them at home at the moment, I want to find out if I'm doing the right things, saying the right things, because, you know, children are sensitive, and certainly the younger one, my 4-year-old, I have no idea. Well, you know, we keep saying that naughty bug thing is happening. That's why you can't go around grandma's. That's why, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I just want to make sure we're saying all the right things. So today should be great. So we're starting off with Maite Ferrin, who is a child psychiatrist. And then later we'll be speaking to a head teacher and educationalist, Chris Billings. So today, 2 amazing guests, all talking about child health and how we make sure our children get through this in as a positive way as possible. Thank you for joining the show. We are all about education. We're all about trying to live healthy and happy. And at the same time, of course, we're trying to raise funds for the Trussell Trust. It was nice to see that the BBC in the news programmes last night were giving the Trussell Trust some airtime and sort of explaining to the whole nation how more than ever we need to help and support our food banks. And if you could right now make a donation today via the Just Giving up here, or if you could make a text donation over there, then that would be absolutely fantastic. We really, really do need your support and your help during this very, very difficult time, where more families than ever are needing help to put food on their table. And many of them are families with children. Many of those, of course, their children would have been getting free school meals, but now are having to obviously feed their children from home, putting a real financial burden on many families. So anything we can do to help in a small donation, large donation, everything is gratefully received. And we're raising it for the Trussell Trust, who operate 1,250 different food banks across the UK. Thank you very much for your support so far. Now, my son Jack is driving the show today. He's over there on what we call camera 3 in the corner of the dungeon. Say hello to everybody.
I wouldn't call it a dungeon.
Say hello to everybody, Jack.
Hi guys.
Now, you were waving at me a minute ago. What was you after?
Yeah, so Jewelry Maker have decided this week they're going to start making kits that all profits that they make will go to the Trussell Trust. So if you're interested in jewelry or know a Jewelry Maker already, please go watch these shows, buy some kits, and all profits will go to the Trussell Trust. That's my bit of camera.
Well done, Jack. A professional presenter there. If you didn't hear that because he hadn't got a microphone on, jewelrymaker.com, and he's mentioning that because his grandmother's a TV presenter on there. They're making kits this week, how to make your own jewelry, and all the profits from those kits going to the Trussell Trust. So thank you very much to Jewelry Maker indeed, and thank you for all joining us. We're going to have loads of questions coming up through the show, I am sure. So let's get straight on to our first guest. Dr Maite Ferrin is currently locked down in a hospital in London. How are you this morning?
Hi, Steve. Very good morning. I'm really good, thank you. And you, how are you?
Yeah. Hey, it's different. It's just different. And I've got 5 kids at home. I've got 2 grandchildren, and my grandson, I saw the day he was born, and I've not yet seen him again since, because he was literally born about 2 weeks before lockdown. So testing times. So I'd like loads of advice from you today on what I should be doing as a parent. What should I be saying as a parent? But before we get going, what is a child psychiatrist?
Right. So a child psychiatrist is a medical doctor, in fact, okay? It's a medical doctor who specializes in mental health. And for that, we have to have a very good understanding of both physical health and mental health. And many people can think that physical health and mental health are opposite, or they don't have any relationship. But actually, it's just the opposite. Physical health is very closely linked to mental health, and it's very important for all of us to understand how important it is to look after ourselves and our physically to maintain a good mental health well-being.
Excellent, that's really good advice. And what sort of children age do you specialise in? Is it a broad spectrum, or when do we start to feel that we can advise parents?
Right, so we deal with children from the very, very young age, like sometimes they're one and a half year old, to the age of 18, when they transition to adult psychiatry.
Okay, excellent. So let's start off with younger children, and then let's talk about maybe those in the adolescent years. But let's start off with younger children. What are sort of the common problems we're facing today, and in particular, what sort of problems we're finding with lockdown, and what, as parents, what signs should we be looking for, and then give us some advice on, to best manage the situations with our children.
Well, that's a very good question. This is a particular challenging situation and time for all of us. So as you can imagine, for children, it's even more difficult, and particularly for those who have any mental health concerns or who are struggling. So what we can see is generally, like the youngest one, the children are sometimes affected by anxiety and depression, and some of them might kind of show it in a way that is behavioral symptoms. So they can become oppositional or defiant or not follow the rules. So, but that doesn't mean that they are doing it in purpose, but that they are struggling inside. So this is like kind of a manifestation or showing us that they are struggling inside. So this is the most common, the most common conditions in little ones. In adolescents, we can see depression and anxiety as well, and we can see young people struggling with drug use or with PTSD, or some of them, they might have psychotic disorders or bipolar disorders. So the difference is a little bit in between what you can see in young children and what you can find in more adults or more older children.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Obviously, when things go wrong with families, or certainly with children, in terms of psychiatric needs, you're there to support and help them. And of course, if there's a serious issue, that's we should seek out professionals like yourself. But in early days or mild issues and symptoms, can you give us some tips as parents what we could be doing if we think our children are just starting to become a bit anxious or a bit depressed, particularly in light of this lockdown?
Right. So first of all, it's very important that parents have an open discussion and talk to their kids, okay? And that they have these conversations with them regularly, checking how they feel and how the situation is affecting them, okay? This situation is going to affect differently depending on the child. So there are child who can feel like scared. There are other kids who can feel a bit sad or worried about the situation, or who can think things are never going to change. So it's really important to explore with them how they feel, so that we can kind of ascertain what is the best way to manage the situation. So basically, we have to make sure that we have containment and the right environment to talk to them, and try not to force them to talk, but offer that we're there to support them, and try to answer all these questions in an honest way, because sooner or later they're going to find what is going on. So if we lie to them, they won't be able to rely on us. So it's very important to be frank. And then it's also very important that we discuss this topic at a developmental level that is appropriate to our child, okay? Mm-hmm. So we won't be talking the same or using the same language with a child who's 3 years old or to a child who is 17 or 16 years old. We won't be able to give the same amount of information And so we have to kind of be able to adapt the type of language we use to this specific child. Also, it's important to note that not all the children want to know the same. So there are kids who might be more curious and might be asking for more and more details, and there might be kids who don't really want to know anything. So we need to respect that as well. Also, it's important that we reassure them in a way that we can't lie to them. We can't say, well, nothing is going on, because indeed a lot of things are happening right now. But we have to let them know that if we do things appropriately, they most likely, they won't be ill, they won't be suffering the symptoms of the virus, and that if indeed they feel ill, the symptoms will be very mild, and they will be looked after by the doctors and the parents and everyone around them. So ultimately, it won't be like a major illness or problem. Yeah, these can be tips for them.
No, they're great tips. So with my 4-year-old, for example, the language we use is, we just call it because of the problem. Because of the problem, you can't do this. Because of the problem, you can't do that. So that's the language we use there. And then obviously with the older children, they fully understand what's going on. But our approach as a family, for right or for wrong, I'd love to get your feedback, is to not watch too much of the news and say, look, at the end of the day, you know, we're keeping our distance. That's why we're not going out. We're washing our hands like we're supposed to. We're eating real food and looking after our own health. So can we now, just as a family, focus on the positives? Because yeah, there's loads of terrible things happening, and one of our companies is probably going to go bust that we own. But and they worry about that. Look, if you worry about anything, talk to us. But other than that, let's look at the positives. We're all sitting around the dinner table for the first time in a long time every single night. Because my son's back from university, which he's been away for 6 months. And so our approach, in a nutshell, is with the kids, be there for them, but then just try and focus on the positives and shut out some of the news, really.
Exactly. I think that's a very positive approach, because ultimately there are things that we can't do about the virus. So we can obviously try to wash our hands, maintain social distance, but then ultimately what we can do is try to enhance our physical health and our mental health, so that we can beat the virus much better. And therefore our kids need to understand that if they sleep well, if they eat properly, if they exercise, their immune system is going to be stronger, and in case they have the virus, they will be able to beat it, and they will be fine. And also, it's important for them to understand that they have to remain strong, and as you said, Steve, being positive, just thinking that, you know, this is going to make us stronger at the end of it, and try to find ways of dealing with our anxiety as well. So this is a good time if you want to try and learn new ways of dealing with anxieties and fears and worries that we have.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic advice. Now, I know you've written loads and loads of different white papers around you know, the health of children and so on, and I know you've written lots in Spain. Talk to me about the link between some of things like ADHD and nutrition, bipolar and nutrition. What sort of links you've found around food, nutrition, and mental wellness for children?
Well, so as I said at the beginning, the link between nutrition and mental health is very strong. And we know that good nutrition is not only linked to good physical health, because we have studies that link like a nutritious food with reduced risk of diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular risk, cancer. We already know that. But there's more and more scientific evidence suggesting that nutrition and nutritious food can be very relevant to promote mental health, right? And there are, for instance, studies suggesting that in 2014 there was one study suggesting that the more fruits and vegetables we eat, the better our mental health well-being is. So there are other studies suggesting that Mediterranean diet is linked to a reduced risk of depression, and that this risk is maintained for a length of time, like up to 6 months after the study. So there are more and more studies suggesting that it's very, very important that we pay attention to what we eat, and not just in terms of the components or the nutritional factors, but also how we eat it. Like if we, for instance, eat big amounts or small amounts, or if we are in the table sharing the meal with family members. So there are a number of aspects that are very crucial for our mental health. And especially in children, for instance, there are also more and more studies suggesting that kids who have good breakfast, or who have breakfast every day, they perform much better academically in terms of, or in comparison to those who don't have breakfast. So sometimes parents come to the clinic saying, well, I would like my child to be more able to focus and to pay attention. And I have to stress out the importance of, it's very important that your child sleeps well, that eats breakfast every day, because otherwise he or she won't be able to go and perform well at school. So these are aspects that sometimes we don't pay attention to, and it's very important that we do as parents.
And I guess when we talk about breakfast for children, it needs to be a nutritional dense breakfast. Otherwise, where are the vitamin B's coming from? Where's the vitamin C coming from? So it's not a case of just sitting there and having, the colourfully flavoured cereals. I guess it's more about trying to make sure that they've got food that's nutritionally dense. I guess also with the brain growing for a child in that development stage, eating the right food must have a massive part to play with trying to prevent or reduce the symptoms of ADHD and bipolar and so on.
Absolutely. We have to bear in mind that the brain is a very sensitive organ, and it's totally like the activity of the brain is going to totally depend on the components or the diet that we take. And there are things like, for instance, omega-3. Omega-3, our body, sorry about the lighting, our body can produce omega-3, and it's therefore important that we take omega-3 in our diet. And we know that lower levels of omega-3 in our body are related to some mental health illness, and we like executive function problems and all that. And we also know that there are conditions like depression, psychosis, dementia, that they recommend supplements of omega-3 when treating these conditions.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of research done, one in Wales with a school of special needs, and they supplement a lot of B vitamins and omega, and the results were fascinating. It's something that Patrick Holford did some years back. So we're doing kind of the right things with our kids at the moment, different things for different ages, trying to keep them away from the news, trying to stay positive, trying to feed them the right things. And of course you mentioned exercise, trying to keep them physically well as well. Is there anything else that we should be doing?
Well, I think in terms of so the three main areas I think are sleep, nutrition and exercising. So these three areas are essential if we want to maintain a good mental health. And then I think parents can do a very good job in terms of reducing stress levels in their kids. Like parents are very important when they have to deal with anxiety, and the way that they can support their kids is going to be essential, because it's the way that their kids are going to learn how to cope with the stress in the future when they become adults. So I would suggest that parents understand how they can support their kids when they feel stressed out. and how they can suggest ways of de-stressing, for instance, like breathing techniques or mindfulness. Also how they can talk to them when they feel stressed out, and how they need to reassure them and offer some support when they can't deal with their own problems, so that they start learning how to deal with difficulties on their own. So there are ways of that parents can support the kids a lot, to a great extent, I would say.
I guess if we're stressy around the children ourselves, the children sort of see their parents being stressy and they develop it. I remember reading once that most of your personality is developed by the age of 3 or something. I don't know how true that is. And therefore, if I'm stressed around my 10-year-old, does that rub off, or is it really important at a younger age? Or what's your view on, you know, what your children are picking up from the parenting and the environment around them?
Well, it's essential that those around the child keep lower anxiety levels at all time, because kids are going to immediately pick up on the stress levels of those around them. And it's very important from the very young age. They're going to perceive and notice how parents are reacting towards the stressful event. So parents need to be calm and be assertive in front of the child, so that the child feels that the problem is not that big, and that they feel quite certain that they will be able to overcome and to cope with the problem. And absolutely, in fact, there are treatments for children who have anxiety disorders, and most of these treatments involve the parents to have some training themselves to reduce the levels of anxiety, so that the child can benefit from it.
That's really, really good advice. We've got to be more careful, conscientious around what's happening with our own sort of outlook, certainly when we're around the children. You mentioned sleep, and I've got a chart in my book of how long people should sleep at different age brackets, but what's your view on how much sleep, say, 4, 5, 6-year-olds should be getting at the moment? And next question, and also next question, what my daughter, who is 16, so she's, you know, would have been doing her exams right now, she's sleeping way more than she normally would. Should I try and get her not to do that, or is it just say, look, okay, it's a difficult time at the moment, she's a little bit bored, she wants to lie until midday, let her lie in, maybe that's part of her coping sort of mechanism. Any views on whether we should just let them get away with lots of sleep at the moment, or should we be interrupting?
Answer to the second question to begin with. So it is true that with this kind of unusual situation, adolescents are totally reversing their day-night cycle, and some of them go to sleep very late at night, and then that has a knock-on effect, and they can't get up in the morning, and then, or they feel really tired, so it's kind of like, and that is increasing, and then you will see at the end a young person who is awake until 6 in the morning, and then going to sleep later on. I recommend young people, adolescents, to follow our routine and try not to go to sleep very late, because otherwise they won't see the light in the morning, so the body is going to get totally messed up with the information that receives, right? So how much sleep do we need? Well, sleep depends on the person. It's not. We don't have any kind of certain rule that works for everyone, but we know that sleep is very important. The younger the child is, the more sleep they need, and then as they grow up, the sleep is going to be reduced, or the need of sleep is going to be reduced, right? So at the age of 5, 6 years old, most kids would need like 9-10 hours of sleep, and then that is going to gradually start reducing, right? But it depends on the child, basically. It is more important that kids have a routine of every day, like going to sleep at the same time, and then and that is more important than the number of hours itself. So the importance is going to sleep at the same time and waking up more or less at the same time. And the studies have suggested that this is far more important than the number of hours you sleep.
So consistency, again,
Yeah.
great advice. So good nutrition, so making sure the food that we're feeding our children is nutritionally dense. Exercise, sleep. What about getting out in the sun, soaking up vitamin D? Is that important? Vitamin D important to children?
Exactly. So what you can do is, like, especially with the pandemic now, that we are allowed to go out for exercising. So we can go out 1 hour a day, exercise every day, and then at the same time have some light and some sun. And especially these days that have been quite sunny, we can go out, have fresh air, get a little bit of sun, which is good for our vitamin D levels. Okay, so we have to remember that hypervitaminosis, which means low levels of vitamin D, are quite prevalent. So it's up to 25–50% of our population don't have enough vitamin D. So if we go out, we will have a little bit like exercising, vitamin D, and that is going to contribute to our physical health and to our mental health. So vitamin D is important because it has linked to depression. So when we have low levels of vitamin D, we can have depression and some other mental health conditions. So it's important for us to go out.
You mentioned omega as well. How do I get enough omega-3s into my younger children? Because obviously they can't swallow the big capsules. So is it just mainly fish or flax seeds, or what should I be feeding them?
Yeah, so fish is the most important, like salmon, all type of fish, but is good for nutrition, and that is going to give us the essential fatty acids that our body can produce, and one of them is omega-3. Right, and otherwise you have these supplements of omega-3, which, some of them taste a bit nasty, but some others are quite, they don't have any smell or any taste at all. So, but a diet which is rich in fish can be enough.
Brilliant, brilliant. We've got lots of questions come in. Are you happy to stay around for a few minutes?
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you very, very much. How do you make children to choose to eat greens? How does one change the taste buds of a child, especially when they copy their friends, and if one eats a bad one, they copy it? In other words, how do we re-educate our children's taste buds to eat more greens is the question. You know what, it's such a great question because we've never had a problem in our house. All my kids love sprouts, and nobody believes me. They say you must be force feeding your children. I don't know what it is. All my kids, don't you, Jack? They all love sprouts. They all love greens, but there are so many kids that just don't like greens. What can we do to change their taste buds?
I think our kids are not used to have a variety of food, so they're quite used to go to like fast food. And all this type of food that is not nutritious, and it only gives like calories and not much like kind of nutritional supplementation, nutritional value. So I would say trying to have a diet that is variety and gives different choices. So maybe your child is not going to like one particular vegetable, but then if you offer different ones, maybe because of the texture or the color, they might be particular to, don't like, sprouts, but then they might like carrots. So it's about trying different textures, also trying to kind of cook them differently, so that maybe they don't like it raw, but they like it more like cooked. So try to imaginatively create a dish. Also, we can ask them to cook with us. Some kids would eat more if they prepare the food with us, because they would start taking and tasting, and then eventually their taste will get used to it. So I think it's about getting into the routine, okay? Yeah. And also we have to understand that we are role models for our kids. So we can't ask our kids to eat properly if we show that we don't eat properly ourselves, okay? And that's very important, that the whole family is healthy.
So if they see mum and dad eating lots of cakes, it's impossible.
Exactly.
It's not do as I say, and or whatever that phrase is. We in our house we we've had this competition in lockdown. So because I've got 5 kids at home, so we're in 3 different teams, and we have to take it in terms of cooking the evening meal. And just try and get the kids involved with it. And like you say, brilliant advice from you there. You know, cook things differently. You know, we do kale crisps at home because my kids love crisps, but we make crisps out of kale and they love it. And we make chips, but we don't make chips out of potato. We make it out of celeriac and things like that. So lots of things we can do. Nick says, which mental health problems are the most misunderstood? Wow, great question.
Right. I think in general, so I treat ADHD, ASD, because these 2 are the most kind of common conditions in children. I forgot to mention when you asked me. In children who have ADHD or autism, some of them they would express the symptoms with behaviors. Right? And we might think that this child is naughty, or is not wanting to behave, or is oppositional, when reality is that this specific child has a problem called ADHD, and they can't focus and maintain or retain information properly, and they struggle to stay still. So these are the type of problems that go really like kind of under-recognized and they go missing. Also, kids who have what we call internalized problems, which is depression, anxiety, some of them won't manifest or show the symptoms as we would expect in an adult, like saying, well, I'm depressed or I'm sad. So some kids would misbehave when they feel really low in mood, or they would become more challenging or pushing boundaries. And that is sometimes misinterpreted as, well, the child is naughty or the child is playing with me, when reality is that the child is struggling deep inside.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's just great. It's great advice, because one of my children at a certain age was, well, they said he'd got ADHD, and pretty much we got special help for him in the classroom. And whether it was that or just the change in diet, we're not sure which one solved it, but you know, it was solved within about 12 months. So yeah, it is very much misunderstood, because we just did call him the naughty one. He wasn't naughty at all. And the other advice we got was that, you know, if you're just starting the day off with the cornflakes, and then you're going to sandwiches, and then you're going to pasta, pizza, and everything, you're overfeeding your kids but undernourishing them. And one advice we got early on, and it's something I've stood behind now ever since, was that, you know, like the vitamin C and the Bs that we have to get every day because the body can't store them. If you're sending your kids to school and all they've had is bread, or cornflakes or cereals, where's the energy for the brain coming from?
Exactly. So we have to bear in mind that the relationship between obesity and depression, for instance, is by what we call bidirectional, which means people who have depression, up to 60% of them tend to be obese or have weight problems. And the other way around, people who are obese or have overweight, 60% of them, up to 60% of them, are going to have depression. So that's this kind of direct link, which is bidirectional.
Yeah. And it must be the same for children. Happiness starts in the gut. We have this access, don't we, from the gut to the brain, and therefore, you know, I always say, you know, great food equals great mood. So it's really, really important, isn't it? It's really interesting. You started with nutrition as being one of the most important things, and sort of we've carried on with that thread all the way through, which is quite interesting.
It is, and sadly, as a psychiatrist, I can't stress enough to my kids and to the children I treat. That, you know, ultimately, if they have anxiety, for instance, it's not about just therapy or a tablet and medication. They have to also sleep properly, exercise at least 3-4 times a week, So once a day that would be optimal, or if not 3 or 4 times a week, and then eat properly. And I keep saying this, but I think they look at me like, wow, the psychiatrist is a bit it's a bit old-fashioned.
So I'm gonna ask you a question now, and if you don't want to answer it, it's absolutely fine. Just say move on, and we'll move on. So I'm gonna ask you a tricky question. So you're in hospital right now, looking after children, and we know food's important. How does it make you feel when you see the crap food we feed people in hospital?
This is something I had a conversation with someone from your team a couple of years ago. I think, one of the bad things about hospital food is that it's not nutritious enough, or they don't consider food as much as they should consider it as part of the treatment package. And they should be offering food that is like kind of free of fats and more kind of like more vegetables and more nutritious. I think it's changing. I think as years pass, the nutrition I can see in the hospital is more and more has improved, but still we are far away from the concept of understanding food as a treatment in itself.
Yeah, I think Dr. C. Malhotra has had a lot to play with, sort of moaning until the message is getting through, I believe, but I think we've still got a way to go. And thank you for answering it, because I know that was a bit of a tricky question. What kinds of states of mind have you witnessed from young people during the pandemic, asks Nicholas.
Mm-hmm. Well, interesting question. So it's interesting to see how different children react differently to the pandemic, okay? So probably the way they react is going to depend on the child and also the information they receive, right? And how well or how they are contained in their environment, like by family members, by school, if they go to school. So there are kids who understand the situation and they can deal very well, like they understand there's a virus that is kind of like a flu or a common cold type of virus, and they understand the importance, but they don't get really worried or stressed out about it, right? However, there are other kids who can become quite stressed and quite fearful and worried that they can catch the virus. And they can start doing things like obsessed with not wanting to go out, for instance, or kind of wearing gloves and washing their hands. So some of them who have OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, can become more obsessed. And especially if they, and that's why it's important the information they receive. So if they see many news suggesting that people are dying, and then they might feel quite, they might take it personally, and they might think, well, I might die, or one of my mom or my family, anyone can die. So they can become quite scared of the situation. So that's why it's important. I now, to all the children I treat for any other thing, to all of them, I keep asking the same question: how do you feel with this situation?
Yeah. And
how are you dealing with it? Because it's totally different.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I assume, you know, in the hospital you're in right now and on the wards, that most children you're seeing haven't got the virus. They're there for other reasons. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And therefore, this is just added on to their anxiety, I guess, because they're in hospital for other reasons than the virus. But of course, the whole news is the virus. I guess the whole hospital's talking about the virus. And therefore, you know, it's probably just adding on to their problems. Is that right? Or are they actually there because of the virus?
Yeah, well, the kids we treated are kids who have had previous mental health problems, so ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression, psychosis. So they all had previous mental health problems. It's interesting. I would have expected something like more drastic. Like I would have expected something like kids becoming really, really fearful. But I think they're dealing with it quite well, considering the importance. I think there's much more probably anxiety around adults than in kids. I think they're doing extremely well, considering how challenging this time is.
Yeah. We'll go back to the scoreboard in a moment and answer some more questions, but you mentioned OCD there. My 4-year-old lines his cars up so meticulously, all his little toys. Is that an early sign of OCD, or is he just really tidy?
You know what, Steve? We as child psychiatrists, we have to differentiate between symptoms that we call developmentally appropriate, or symptoms that you would expect for any child at their age, and those symptoms that are not appropriate, okay? So, for instance, it is normal that a child who is between 6 months old and 2-3 years old, they might have some separation anxiety when they go to school, right? Because it's the age of separation anxiety. However, if a child is older than that, or if a symptom and has these symptoms, or if the symptoms are very impacting and very prominent, then this child might have a disorder, and therefore the developmentally appropriate symptoms are not there anymore, and we need to start worrying about these symptoms. So what you say about OCD is normal that kids at the age of 7, 9, they start doing like these repetitive things, because that for them is reassuring, and that gives them some type of like relief or reduce their anxiety, okay? However, if a child is doing this very often, or if this is impacting in their everyday life, or is causing a lot of stress and suffering, so if the child is suffering, then we might need to consider that the child might need some help, okay? And it's important that this is considered, because, you know, ultimately the worst case scenario would be like, okay, you take your child, you ask a professional, and the professional says, listen, it's fine, you know, it's developmentally appropriate, don't worry, it will just like wear off with time, and that's fine. But if not, then anxiety can become a chronic problem, and then the symptoms will linger, and the child will continue with the symptoms. And so it's kind of important that parents take this idea into consideration.
Yeah, we will keep a watchful eye. Steve Oliver says, and the food they are fed at school for lunch means they are much worse going home than going in. Is this because they've been carved up lunchtimes? So I think the question is from Steve, it's a bit like school. In fact, let me go back to a question from Steve earlier on. He said, I work in school transport for children with learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, etc., and can't quite understand why there is no education for parents on the subject of diet. That's a really interesting one. So Steve's actually working in a school for children with learning disabilities, but in that particular school, he believes there's no education for parents on the subject of diet. Wow.
Right, yeah, you know, and he's perfectly right. And this is something that at the clinic we're trying to do, is like to engage in parents in education, okay? Because obviously parents can't change the diagnosis, but they can change the way that the child is going to deal with the problems, or sometimes overcome the problems, okay? So it's important, and diet is one specific thing. So diet is a thing that parents should be talked about and taught about. So hopefully in the future we can see parents better educated and more understanding towards the mental health conditions of the kids.
Yeah. So really, really good point there, Steve. Thank you for that. Norma says, should you give supplements to young children?
Sorry, couldn't hear that one.
Yeah, it's from a lady called Norma Coy. She says, should we be giving supplements to young children?
Right. As a general norm, I would say, so it's not that all the kids need supplements. So if you think your child has a nutritious diet, then most likely the child is not going to need any supplements at all. I mean, if you think, for instance, that your child is not eating enough vegetables or fish, then you might consider giving some supplements, okay? Or if you're concerned because the child has some symptoms, obviously, sometimes you can take the child to the doctor, to the GP to do a blood test, and then the blood test will tell you whether, like, there's a lack of vitamin D or deficiency. So there are some deficiencies of minerals that can be seen or observed in blood test results.
That's great. Thank you for that. Some really good questions there. Thank you all for those. They're absolutely brilliant. Leah says, surely the book's new parents are given on what foods to wean your baby onto solids have to be rewritten. That's a good point, isn't it? So there's books out there.
Sorry, Steve, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's from a lady called Leah. Surely the books that parents are given on what foods to wean babies onto solids need to be rewritten. That's a great place to start.
Yeah, you know what? The idea is that the knowledge gets constantly updated, right? So sometimes the books that we have are a bit updated, and they need to be updated, and then scientific evidence is suggesting new evidence about food and how the solid food should be. So yeah, I agree. Some books can be outdated.
Yes, it's a really, really good point there, Leah. And a lot of people say, because I'm a big supporter of we need to change the Eat Well guidelines in the UK. I think it's way too carb loaded and very lacking in nutrition. And I think it's driving obesity, it's driving strokes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes in particular. And one of the reasons we need to change those guidelines is because if those guidelines stay where they are, then books will keep writing that the way to wean your children off milk is to be, carb loading, which is obviously what we don't want to be doing. I know you've got to get back to the woods, so absolutely fascinating talking to you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very, very much for coming on the show. And we will put a little screen up in a bit for the company that you're associated with, because I know you do some great work in your clinic in London. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And well done with the program and raising the money.
Well, we'll try and get best. We've all just got to do our little bit. Well done to Captain Tom, who's raised so much. We're way behind. We've got a long way to go. God bless you. Thank you very much indeed. That was the absolutely brilliantly and highly informative. I learned a lot there. I hope everybody else did too. And we will put a email up for you for Cognition Health, which is the company that Maite Ferrin is associated with in London. Today's food fact. Let's do one that relates to the brain, one that my children love eating, and if yours don't, try and find a way to get them to love it, because it is a fruit that is super, super healthy. Now, while you've heard me many times criticize some fruits like the bananas, like the oranges, like the raisins, which if your children are overweight or if you're overweight, you've got to cut down on because they're full of sugar. The great news is all the berries, the blackberries, the blueberries, the strawberries, the raspberries, have a different type of sugar in there. They don't have fructose. They have a different type of sugar altogether. And it's actually, believe it or not, a sugar in those berries that is good for your teeth. Yes, there is one type of sugar. It begins with an X. It has a Y and an L and an O and an S in it, but I can never pronounce it, so I'm not going to even try. But there is one type of sugar that you get from your berries that is actually super, super healthy for your children's teeth. So if you can get your kids eating lots of berries. What I will say with berries, though, really important to go organic. Doesn't matter whether they're frozen or not frozen. In fact, frozen we think may be even better because they're frozen at the point of picking, so all the nutrition is locked in. But it really is important that they're organic. And the reason for that is if it's not organic, when that berry grows and we spray it with pesticides and herbicides to protect it, we're doing the work that the berry would have done naturally. So it doesn't develop as much of its own antioxidants, its own sort of shelter around the outside. And some research suggests that an organic blueberry compared to a non-organic, it's 9-fold the difference in the health benefits that we get from it. So try and go organic, but it can be frozen, and there's no problem there at all. Right, let's go. Have we got Chris Billings on the phone, Jack? We do? Excellent, there you are. Hi, Chris. How are you this morning?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really, really good, thank you. Now, you're a head teacher and an educationalist. Tell me what life's been for you in the last 2 months or so.
Well, completely different to anything we've ever had before or seen before. Obviously, I know everyone's saying that, but it's been a completely different world. So we're trying to get our heads around it as quickly as we possibly can.
And is your school one of the schools that's still open for key workers' children, or?
Yes, yeah, we have been all the way over Easter, and we will be until we're ready to start opening up again properly for everyone else. So that's been a godsend, really. It's been lovely to be able to have some interaction with some children and have them coming into school.
And what sort of the whole topic is about parenting in lockdown. What advice have you got for us parents? What we should be doing with our children? Feel free to pick different age brackets and separate your comments.
Yeah, I think it's important to realise it's very, very different, really, depending on whether or not you're looking at primary school children or secondary school children, and even beyond up into children who are and older students who are at university. We have to remember that they've also, a lot of the time, found themselves thrown back into home again. Maybe not what they were expecting at a time when they wanted to be as independent as they possibly could be. I think that the biggest piece of advice I give to parents, really, and I've said this to our parents this week as well, is really go easy on yourself. It's very, very hard. Everyone at the moment is finding the situation very, very hard. The schools up and down the country and universities are established and set up to do this job, to be educators. We've got corridors and classrooms and resources and teachers and professionals, all there designed to create an educational environment. Your home isn't. Your home is your home, and that's what it should be. So my biggest piece of advice really for parents at the moment is to really go easy on yourself. Don't feel like you've got to be doing everything, have a 5-period day, get up at 8:30 and immediately get on it, and then be working all the way through to 3:05, because that's really untenable for anybody. But in a lot of cases, it's completely impossible.
Well, Chris, I'm going to make sure my wife listens to that 1 minute segment, because I feel so sorry for her. You know, we've got 5 children at home. We both work full time. We normally have loads of help. We normally have a nanny and a cleaner. Neither of those have been around for 2 months, obviously. And then, you know, it wasn't too bad over Easter. But the second we get back, the amount of demands on my wife from the school, certainly for our 4.5-year-old, has just been. And I said to her the other day, you know. She said, well, I'm not a teacher, I don't know how to do that, and da-da-da. I went, for God's sake, I know they're telling you to do it, but you're just going to have to, you know, he's doing great stuff, he's with his siblings, he's learning, there's a TV program called Number Blocks he's got addicted to, which at least he's getting addicted to something that's happening with maths. And I said, look, he's going to come out of it great. So, yeah, there is a lot of pressure on parents at the moment.
Yeah, and children will find their own way. And, you know, our job in education is to sort that problem out when we reach a point where we're able to have the children back into school again. Hopefully, you know, sooner rather than later. But when that happens, we will have spent time looking at the curriculum and planning how we're going to manage those children coming back into school again. So I know there's a great deal of pressure, and I feel it myself as well sometimes, to feel like this huge volume of work that's there, that you've got to do all of it, otherwise your child's going to fall behind. The most important thing that you can do as a parent at the moment is to safeguard the mental health of your child. That's really the biggest thing you can do. If they come back to us feeling that they have been supported and loved and cared for, we can deal with all the rest of it. That's not a problem. Your job is to not end up in screaming matches every single day because you're driving each other up the wall trying to get things done which are impossible. It's putting too much pressure on yourself, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. Like I say, I'm going to make sure my wife listens to that bit, because she feels down, and because of that very reason of the school are saying, you need to be doing this, need to be doing that. And we're going to have to just sort of limit it. And then you're right, different for my son who's driving this show. He should be at university right now, and life's so different for them all. And the way of keeping him interested was to say, would you mind producing this show for every single morning? And I did tell him I thought lockdown would take about 3 weeks, and here we are on episode number
33.
33, is it? Oh, okay, cool. What about children? So Jack's 18, 4-year-old. What about the kids that are sort of 8, 9 and 10? Any advice for us parents around that area? Because they're certainly asking a lot more questions around. I find my older children can rationalise COVID and what's going on and lockdown. My younger one, we just told him it's the problem and he's fine with it. But a bit more challenging, I think, personally, for the sort of 8, 9 plus, where they start to question a lot more things.
And I think we're finding now that the sort of novelty stage of it is starting to wear off. So that initial sort of wave of excitement about the fact that it was new and suddenly they didn't have to go to school and they could spend time at home, maybe doing things that they wouldn't normally get a chance to do. That, I think, we're reaching the stage now where those children are going to start finding themselves becoming increasingly frustrated, increasingly anxious, because of the fact that they're not used to that novelty is worn off, and now they're realizing this is stretching out ahead of them. And of course, we can't provide any firm answers about when they're coming out of it. And I think at this stage, whereas normally in education we spend a lot of time talking to parents about, please don't get over reliant on technology, please don't spend lots of time looking at screens, please don't be spending lots of time on phones and iPads. At the moment, they're actually a great resource. The one thing those children will probably be missing about school more than anything else will be their friends, will be the people that they're used to seeing every single day. So my advice really, I suppose, for that age bracket is you can go easy a little bit on yourself around technology. It can be a bit of a friend and a support at the moment. If your school is able to set up Zoom calls, or you are yourself able to kind of get online and sort out FaceTime or use some sort of online application so that they can be talking to each other, that actually helps an awful lot. There are games they can play and there are activities that they can do online together, just to try to make them feel like there's still that connection and it hasn't completely stopped. I think
that's really good advice, because my 14-year-old Tom, on his, I'm always trying to get him off his computer normally, and I haven't changed my approach. Maybe I need to just ease back a little bit and say, look, because he's playing games with his mates. What's it called, the latest one, Jack? Is it Fortnite or something?
Fortnite.
I don't know whether a 14-year-old should be playing Fortnite or not, but maybe just lay back a little bit, because at least they're talking to their mates, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that period really from the age of 10 up to the age of 18, 19, what we're supposed to be teaching our children is about how to start to gain some independence from us as a family, and their brains are telling them that they should be now starting to gain some independence. Their friends become more important to them. And of course, the shock for them, and maybe the shock for families at the moment, is going to be that at that point where they should be starting to pull away, gain some independence, get some life of their own, they're actually finding themselves locked in with the family and getting themselves into a situation where they're very, very much connected together. And so I think you do need to go easy a bit on yourself. You do need to understand that if they want to spend a bit longer talking to somebody on the phone and having that connection with their friends, that's actually very, very important generally for their development. That's what they would be doing normally, and it's perfectly natural for them to be doing it.
No, it's really good advice. I started or co-founded a charity called Lads and Dads about 5 years ago, because I felt as a parent there wasn't enough support, and lots of parents weren't as good as we used to be at understanding that adolescence bit, that crossover from child to adulthood. And I'd just come back from spending time with the Maasai, and they were still sending their kids out in the wild, like we've been reading for hundreds of years. They still do it, and I came back and realised that the bit I didn't understand as a parent was how to handle my kids through that sort of transition, and it is, you just hit the nail on the head. That's the bit when they're supposed to be going out, and we're supposed to encourage them to be going out and doing their own things and finding themselves. And of course, they're locked with their parents at the moment, unable to see their mates and do that in any way. So yeah, that's a real challenging time, isn't it, at the moment? That sort of crossover period.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's there's no right or wrong way of doing it. That's we're all finding our way through this at the same time. We're all trying to figure out a way of doing it, and it will be individual for everybody. So I think that's one of the other issues sometimes with social media, of course, is that if we are spending more time on it, we're going to see an awful lot of people posting their sort of best life moments, so all the exciting things they've been doing, and that can end up making us feel even worse. So it's remembering that there is no right or wrong way to do this. It's just finding the right way for you.
Yeah, I say to my children all the time that the only problem is, there's great things about social media, but the biggest problem is people only show their best side forward. And I say that comparison is the biggest theft of happiness. And if you keep comparing to photos on social media, people only put their happy side forward. So we have to be a little bit careful, don't we, with too much social media. Now, earlier on we heard, and again you can just say, oh, I don't want to answer the question, but we heard a psychiatrist, Maite Ferrin, saying that nutrition plays a big part in sort of children's mental wellness and so on and so forth. And obviously we're seeing many more childhood sort of labels around ADHD, bipolar, and so on, OCD at the moment. What's your school's take on what you're feeding your kids all the time? Are you getting support from government, or are things changing, or is it still pretty much, nutritionally sort of not dense food? Are we getting better at schools, or is it not on the radar yet?
I think there was a real concerted effort, probably about 5-6 years ago, to really look extensively into nutrition and the food that their children were being fed at school. I think it's a very difficult time at the moment, kind of sourcing some things which you would like to, and as much as possible we do try to make sure that we give them something balanced and something nutritional. At the same time as trying to offer them a choice. So it's if I was to say that it was perfect, it's not perfect at all. There's still a lot of work to be done, but it's trying to find a balance between what schools can physically afford to do and actually what is available. So it's heading in the right direction, I would say, but maybe we're not quite there yet.
Well, I know your school, where it's based, and I think if you want any help from me, part of my Health Daddy campaign is called the Breakfast Club. So try and help schools with the Breakfast Club with some education, a little bit of funding and things like that. And because you come on the show this morning, if you want to get in touch afterwards, be more than happy to come down my team and see what we can do to help.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely brilliant talking to you. I know you're at school at the moment, so I'm sure you've got a really busy day. It's been absolutely fascinating. But have you got just 1 minute to answer any questions that have come up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks indeed. Let's have a look. What advice would you give, this is a guy from a chap called Nicholas Davis, what advice would you give to parents who feel they are struggling?
I would give yourself a bit of time off. I think you can absolutely feel like overwhelmed, particularly if you look at online platforms for work. There's a huge amount of it, and my advice would always be, at this stage now, start looking at all that work which your schools are setting and the teachers are working very hard to create, but start looking at more as a menu of activities rather than a rod for your own back, and do what you feel you can do comfortably. Do what you think that the child can handle without starting to feel overly stressed or anxious. And if that means some days you say, we're just not going to bother with it today, then that's absolutely fine. It really is about you trying to select on things and find things that are for you, and your child being able to select things they want to do, which is going to still keep their brain engaged and yet not drive you all demented. I think that the biggest piece of advice I give to anybody is read a book. And it's the easiest thing you can do, and it's the best thing you can ever do for the education of your child is read a book.
Excellent, thank you very much. One question: as adults and good mental health, is there anything we can learn from younger generation? In other words, is there anything we should be taking from them in this situation at the moment?
Well, I think children are incredibly resilient and very adaptable. Far more maybe than we are, but we have to remember that, of course, our children are a product of ourselves. They're the product of the situation they found themselves in, their home life, the way they've been brought up. So I suppose the biggest thing you can learn from the way children react to things is that they are a mirror of a lot of the time of what you have done yourself. So maybe you can learn a lot about yourself by looking at the way they've handled things, because they've learnt those behaviours a lot of the time from you. So whether that's positive or not, I don't know. But certainly you'll find, I think you can learn things about yourself by the way your children react to things. But they're certainly a great deal more resilient and adaptable than we sometimes give them credit for, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I try and say to parents a lot of the time, you know, because schools sometimes get the blunt end of the stick. And I say, look, they're only at school for that amount of hours, 5 days a week, and not that many weeks in a year. You know, if the kids, you know, it's got to start at home. You know, we've got to take. It's not a drop-off service and expect the schools to do the whole education. We've got to be doing it at home. And along the lines there, Leah says, a round of applause for all teachers worldwide. Their job is so difficult, especially now. Hours setting work, correcting, and then contacting students on their well-being at home. They are a lifeline for so many. I totally agree. I think you've all done absolutely brilliant, and let's make sure next Thursday's round of applause, it's not just for our brilliant NHS staff and the care workers, but also for our schools too. Chris, it's been brilliant having you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And I just hope for your sake, everybody's sake, life gets back to normal as soon as possible. And I hope the schools that I send my children back to, I send them back, and they're part of the solution and not the problem. So God bless you, man. Thank you for coming on, Chris.
No, thank you very much indeed. Take care.
That's brilliant. That was Chris Billings. And seriously, Chris, if you want any help with the Breakfast Club, we'd be more than happy to put you on our program with Primal Living. Thank you for taking part today. Thank you for so many questions on the internet. Anything you can give to Just Giving or anything you can give via the text to the Trussell Trust really would be appreciated. Remember last night on the BBC, they picked up on the fact that the food banks now are really, really struggling, and they really do need our help. So anything you can do, that would be absolutely fantastic. And until the same time tomorrow, keep safe. We've got a whole host of brilliant guests to take us through the weekend, including the brilliant Dr. Malcolm Patrick. Every single time I get that wrong. I do apologise to all my friends, my family, and everybody I've just let down, because I've just put two doctors' names together. Are we still recording?
Yeah.
Oh no, are we?
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Oh, sorry. Let's start again. Can't believe I've done that. Should we start the show all over again?
Yeah. All right. Hang on.
Start the show all over again.
Do it again.
Do it again. It's not live, is it? Malcolm Kendrick, the brilliant doctor of heart, the author of... I can't
Just say goodbye.
The Great Cholesterol Card and Doctrine Data will be joining me, as long as I haven't just upset him, over the weekend. See you tomorrow. Join me at 10 o'clock every morning live on YouTube. Simply go to Primal Living's channel and you'll see our new Food Bank Show. Now, the Food Bank Show is basically what it says on the tin. We're trying to raise money for food banks across the UK that more than ever need our support. At the same time, in every show, I'll be joined by doctors and nutritionists that are going to help us reshape the food that we eat. Because maybe there's a bit of a silver lining for our health right now. All of the restaurants are shut. The McDonald's, the Subway, the Greggs, they're all closed. So we've got to change our eating habits anyway. But with the advice of some of the world's leading doctors, some of the world's leading nutritionists, I'm going to help you reshape the food that you're consuming and hopefully boost your immune system to get through this very difficult time.